You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales, streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
What's up, the internet? It's producer Kyle. How's it going? This is In Stores This Week, the show where we talk about new books that are in stores some other time. No, they're in stores this week. That's why we call the show that. Anyway, we just got done having a pre-show kind of conversation with Dan and Jay and I, where we discussed how much swearing we could swear during the show, because a lot of the books this week are eliciting swear words from us. We're going to try our hardest not to swear, but some of them are sweary. Also, like, I'm wearing a shirt with Pablo the Gorilla on it. Shout out to everybody who's not watching the show because they're traveling for New York Comic Con. Have fun. And yeah, that's the thing. I really did have more to say with my cold open, but my mind just went blank in the middle of the talking about how much swearing we could swear. And now I'm just stalling while I figure out where the opener is in the list of things to click on. So here we go. What's up?
What's going on, fellas?
I am glad to see you back, Kyle, because that means you can run the show and I can go back to being the grumpy one that hates all the comics.
Dan, we it's pretty obvious that we split time as the grumpy ones who hate all the comics.
Okay.
Like, we really do split time. Like, I hate a lot of stuff you like, you hate a lot of stuff I like, and Jay likes everything.
Except for this week.
Yeah.
Like, we are definitely the Simon Cowells of this show. And Jay is both Randy Jackson and Paula Abdul.
Valiant, we need more books, Valiant. Please.
Yes.
More
It's
books,
true.
Valiant.
Not gonna argue with that point.
Yes.
We got Ed, we got John. What's up, everybody? Well, established last night that we get one F-bomb for PG-13. It's two. True, Ed, we get one F-bomb, and we actually get one S-bomb. And I think we can use them both on one book this week, if we're being real honest.
Yes.
Cool Gamer, how's it going? Yeah, you're right. I'm back this week. I'll be back next week. I had to take last week off, as I've had an incredibly torturous 14-day streak here, that just personal life stuff that I've been dealing with. So I'm good to be back. I'm glad to be back. It's good to spend your time reading comics.
I have an idea.
Huh.
What if we explain one of the books, we curse, then we run the opening credits again?
Still the same show, bro.
Seems like not. If we all say goodnight.
And if we curse in the first 5 minutes, I can't monetize the episode.
Oh, okay.
So, it's one of those things is that you got to not curse for the first 5 minutes. Then you can pretty much say whatever you want. But
Those jackholes.
right. I prefer Jack Wangs, but
Well, jackhole, of course, is the word created by Jimmy Kimmel when he was a K-Rock DJ. So I just kind of carried that tradition forward.
right. But it's good. So yeah, we have 10 books this week.
And how many of them do we like?
2, maybe? Maybe.
I will go with 3, maybe 4.
Okay, that's fair.
So, unfortunately, because I just finished reading the books like a half hour ago, I didn't have time to. Thank you, John. We appreciate that.
For real.
So we appreciate that. We try real hard to be entertaining and be honest about our books. It's true, Ed, but then that's the same as cursing, and we still can't do that for another 10 seconds. So
And I'm going to save that for one particular book.
Yeah.
right. Anyway, we didn't have time to put together the PowerPoint like we usually do, with the fun graphics. So it's going to be like the old school show where my face gets covered up, which is probably for the best because I'm looking particularly ugly today. So now that we're into the 5-minute mark, we can curse as we ask, what was this shit? Sweetie Candy Vigilante by Dynamite Comics, from Dynamite Comics. I told the guys a story. I took a nap in the middle of reading the books. Not intentionally, it just sort of happened. And I woke up, read this book, and thought, no, I'm still having a fever dream.
I did not hate this book. This felt like a 90s Chaos Comics style twisted humor book. You know, it's like if you want dark horror twisted, then this is your kind of thing. It's goofy kind of character, somewhere between Christmas and Halloween. A lot of the jokes don't land, but the art is that bad girl style of art from the 90s, that kind of where chaos started with Lady Death and stuff like that. So yeah, it's dark horror humor, but I mean, it's not my type of book. It's not one that I would look forward to reading, but I could see there being an audience for this type of, this trope, this type of thing. And I think it hits what it's trying to do. So
honestly, for me, I found myself at several times wondering if the preview copy we got wasn't missing dialogue. Right? Because the jokes don't hit in places where it feels like they left off a punchline. Or they left off a setup for a punchline. Right? It was like one week, Dan, you remember we got a book from somebody that was missing entirely all of the dialogue?
Yes.
It felt like that to me. Like, this has the makings to be insanely good and very funny and a lot of fun. The art in it and the look of it is exactly what you'd expect from this book. There's over-the-top gore that's hysterical, but it's like, tell me a story too. And it felt like I was being told the story by a 4-year-old where they come to you and go, hey, we did the thing, and then we went to the thing, and then there was a guy who did a thing, and a tree, and a thing, and then boom, and then a thing.
Look, if you like Harley Quinn, but want her to be darker, more horrific and gory.
Yeah. I'll preface everything I say with this. If this looks interesting to you, pick it up. You know, these are all opinions. You know, most of the time they're good. Sometimes they're not so good. But here's what I'm going to say about this. Awesome cover, but what in the manic pixie vampire, maybe dream girl, did I just read? Like, there's awesome kills in this, and no doubt about it, but the main character feels like a 10-year-old mind in Mia Malkova's body. It was so strange, but I couldn't stop reading it. And like, I kind of want to read the next one, and I don't know how I feel about that.
I want to know why she's Sweetie Candy Vigilante, because there was no vigilanting.
I have no idea. But this was a crazy book.
Not that deep, Sean. I think that's the other thing I will say about this is that if this is an exposition story and the sidekick that shows up towards the end of the issue is available in issue 2 and they're wreaking havoc, I can get behind that concept. I just don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't know everything I needed to know coming to the end of this book.
It's Harley Quinn meets Evil Ernie.
Edward, that's a little bit of a spoiler. I don't want to the candy vigilante part. I don't want to give that away. You have to look at that for yourself.
So I don't. I This is
really wants Cthulhu in their universe.
No lie about that. Goodness.
They've literally turned Narlotiatep into a Zenoscope girl.
I'll go ahead and I'll take this one first.
Okay.
So there was 3 books that I read first. And after the first 3 books, I was like, man, I hope not every other book is like these first 3. This one was definitely one of those 3. It is another way too long, for one thing. Ends up tying together at the end. Insert any monster you really want to in its place book. Yes, it's Cthulhu. I could have sworn the last 3 or 4 things of Zenoscope we read had Cthulhu in it somewhere. But it also has the trenchers or the mer people. And I don't know, it's just make them shorter, make them scary, have just one story. I mean, it ends up tying together at the end, like I said, but even still, it's way too long. It tries to do too much, and for me, it does nothing at all.
Ed, this is Grim Tales of Terror: The Rise of Cthulhu,
and the stories actually connect to some of the stuff we've been reading in Zenoscope lately. They actually kind of follow up on some of them. So if you are following Zenoscope, you're going to want to grab this book because it is putting the pieces for this new era they're doing where the old ones are the bad guys. They seem to be embracing Cthulhu big time now. And that's just the direction they're going. But they do literally tap into Narlotiatep, and which again is as Cthulhu as you get, short of Cthulhu himself. This is Lovecraftian to the point where, I don't even know how to explain it.
Wouldn't it just be easier for them to do just a Lovecraftian Zenoscope book? Just have it without their characters?
Lovecraft doesn't have large breastises.
Okay. Movie book sell.
And if they do, you never speak of them because they can't be named.
It's true. Yeah. I've never wanted Cthulhu to both not rise and rise as much as I did while reading this book. I wanted this book to be over without him. And then I wanted it to happen in real life so that my sanity would go away.
Wow.
20 pages in, I'm going, are you going to at some point come around to a complete thought? And then they did. And, I always enjoy the Zenoscope books. Like I always do. They often have a lot of problems for me. But in terms of just sitting down and reading a comic, I can always count on them. Right? I know what I'm going to get when I pick up a Zenoscope book. And this book was no exception. Did I have massive problems with it? Yes. However, it still looks like a Zenoscope book. It still reads like a Zenoscope book. And sometimes that's what you need, is that kind of comfort zone that a company like Zenoscope can provide. Especially when we get into some of the books later where Dan is reserving his curse words, where you're really testing the bounds of what is and isn't a comic book. This does not do that, but it works, in whatever system it plays in. Next book is a book that I was really excited for. And having read it, I'm very disappointed. But isn't that true of all the covers, bro? Anyway. But I have a theory as to why I was disappointed, and I want to get everyone's opinions. This is Siren's Gate #1 by Shannon Mayer from Dynamite Comics. And here's my thought. This book to me was not a good story. Wasn't a great book. The layouts of the pages were weird. The whole layout of the book just turned me off. However, I'm willing to accept that I am an old man. And I'm thinking, hey, you kids, get off my lawn with these new concepts, right? It is an incredibly unique way to do it. So I did not like. However, I'm willing to be wrong in favor of this might be something new and exciting that I just don't understand yet.
I have seen a lot of work done in this way. Now, I don't know how Shannon does his process. I will tell you, this is what it made me think of, is the software package Poser. 3D animation design thing. And basically, that's how the characters look. Now, on its own, it's really well done. The faces and stuff, but it's stiff. All the panels are stiff. It doesn't have that natural flow of a comic. And I think that kept me from getting into what seemed like a very light story. You know, I mean, was there really much going on? She works at a bar. She gets invited to an author's house. The author kisses her. We have a werewolf battle.
That's the whole book.
J.D. Smith, we don't show interiors because technically you're not supposed to show interiors until the book is released. And since the book is technically not out until tomorrow, we don't show interiors.
Yeah. And
I will say this, though. The interiors look a lot like the cover.
Yeah. Again, if you look at the cover and you think this is a great cover, you're going to like the book. The story is very light. And again, Shannon is doing great as a cover artist. So maybe this is going to get people's attention. It's not a bad story. It's just like there isn't a lot to it. It's just pretty quick. Let's go. And anytime we have a Dynamite book, it reminds me, please hit the like and subscribe buttons while you're here. Jay?
So I'm with Kyle on points for originality. I personally have never seen this art style in a comic before. Speaking of the story, though, excuse me, I was a little confused by the beginning. Like, was that the book the main character's reading, or is that actually part of the story? I was confused about that. But at any rate, this read like an ad for a phone game. Like, because it really looks like it's somebody using an avatar and just text messaging. That's how the dialogue bubbles look to me. It look like text message bubbles. Or like a create your own comic or something like that. Again, original for a comic, but doesn't quite do it for me. Dan pretty much explained the whole book in 2 minutes. It is a very light story. It's more about the art with this one, I think, maybe.
J.D. Smith, it's Shannon Mayer, something like that.
It's Mayer.
Yeah.
Like John Mayer.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I am super willing to be wrong on this one and just be willing to be the guy who isn't understanding the new thing. And that may be the case, but yeah, I think it's about the art, and if you're into the art, you'll be into the book. And I'm more of a story-driven guy, so I was looking for more plot. All right. Minor Threats, number 2 by Patton Oswalt. I'll start on this one.
All right.
I really, really liked number 1. And in a lot of ways, number 2 is a stronger book. However, I didn't like it as much as I liked number 1. It felt like the voice maybe wasn't as strong. In the first issue, the character you follow, who's there on the cover, the girl in the front, really does a lot of sort of narrating the story, kind of telling you how they got to where we were. And in this one, the voice changes to like now you're in the room and you're not being told what's happening, and that threw me for a little bit of a loop. I liked the story, I liked the plot, I liked everything that happened, but that change in sort of the narration style took me a few pages to kind of wrap my brain around and get into. So that is, I think, the weak point of this book, but another really strong entry from Patton Oswalt in this series.
See, I really got into this one. I didn't mind that. I love the Riddler pastiche with the thinker guy. I love the idea that someone is weaponizing dead sidekicks. And this really is kind of a what if in a way for the DC universe. You know, I mean, you remember when Joker killed Robin. This whole thing is basically what if after Joker killed Robin, Batman went on a killing spree, going after all his old, trying to get revenge, and the Justice League are beating the crap out of people just to get them off the streets so Batman won't kill them. It is a very dark take on a very different world, but it's entertaining. And it's kind of an interesting way to show them, because I don't know about you guys, but when I see a book like this, or when I see something like The Boys, every once in a while my mind will just go ahead and swap in the characters they're pastiching, they're homaging. And then you see it as, oh, Robin's dead, Batman's killing everybody. It becomes more interesting. I think the main character is Harley Quinn at this point. And you had the Riddler, and it just has a different feel to it when you do that. And it's fascinating to me. So I'm in on this book so far. I like it. I like the tweaks on the characters. I like the pacing and the dialogue, and I loved how they showed how the genius character thought. That work through. That's that Sherlock Holmes style. Well, this is what he was thinking. This is how he got to this type of thing. I found that really fascinating, and there's a few twists in it that I really liked. So,
yeah. All I have to say is thank you for this, because the first 3 books I read, like I said, were just. This one is so fun. It's so well written. I like the fact that they switched from Playtime, who was the kind of the narrator in the first one, to Brain Tease, who's the narrator in this one. And it kind of makes me wonder if they're going to do that for every issue, where they switch to a different character. Folks, get on this one. I'm telling you, get on this one. If you're not reading it already, please do so. I love this book. I thought this was even better than issue 1. And this is one of those books that I really hope that we get to read all the way through. And then when we read all the way through it, I want to go out and buy the trade so I can reread it. Man, I only see this series getting better, and I just think the book's excellent. I just think it's excellent. Patton Oswalt did a tremendous job.
And the basic premise is a villain has killed the sidekick of the Batman-like character in the city, and now the Batman-like character is on a rampage killing everybody he can, trying to find the Joker-like character. And the Justice League isn't really stopping him, but they're basically beating up the villains to get them off the street so the Batman character won't affect them. And what we follow is a group of those D-level minor threat villains trying to capture the Joker-type character and off him to stop the rampage.
It's really good.
So.
All right. Before we go on to our next book, I want to take a second and remind everybody to head over to comicshoplocator.com, type in the area code where you are, and visit Comic Shop Locator to find comic shops near to where you are. I am traveling the next 5 days, so I'll be using Comic Shop Locator to find comic shops near where I'm traveling to and around where I'm at. And as well, I don't know if people realize how unique of a concept this is. Where we're going, we're looking for things to do during the day on Thursday because I don't have the reason we're going isn't, doesn't start until Friday, but we're getting there on Thursday. So there's stuff to do. And there's not like a clever website you can go to and be like, okay, I'm interested in these things. Show me the tourist attractions in my area. But you can do that for comic shops. You can go to Google and be like, tourist attractions, Baltimore.
Ooh, shiny.
But
there's a website called Around Me that does that.
Right. But there's not I can't go, I'm into pop culture. Show me all the different pop culture places in Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
You've got it's a way more broad kind of thing on Around Me or on Google. So head over to Comic Shop Locators, comicshoplocator.com, and check that out. Okay. The next book I was really high on 1 and 2. Number 3 is taking maybe a pause for me. Maybe it's plateaued and we'll see what happens in number 4. But Survival Street number 3 is a little bit of a departure from the first 2 books in that I didn't find this one near as funny as the first 2 or near as allegorical as the first 2.
No, I avoided the rush and hated this from the beginning. This one is quick premise. Basically, the guys from Sesame Street are going up against the current world, and in a very violent way. And this particular episode just felt so over the top preachy that, and I mean, it was just almost unreadable. I didn't find any of it funny. I haven't found it funny using the allegory of the Sesame Street guys in these situations before, but this just got ridiculous. And the premise in this episode of what they did to kids, it's like they couldn't make it any less subtle. They literally hit you over the head with a hammer trying to get their point across. So, yeah, I haven't been in on this one since the beginning, and I'm definitely not in here.
I can completely agree because honestly, this was a bit of a letdown for me, and I enjoyed the first 2 issues as well. But the thing that I was liking about this was, for me, it was funny and it was just over the top absurd. This book, this one, it's sad and depressing. I felt bad reading it. And then you have this character named Milo. And this character spends most of the book speaking in third person. And then there's a part where near the end, he's like, a good friend once told Milo. And I was like, why'd you even do that? It just seems dumb. The whole issue was just this wasn't what I started reading. Granted, there was preachy stuff in it, but for me, the way they handled it was better than they did here. I kind of just hope that this isn't the direction they're going to take for the rest of the series, because if it is, they lost me on this one.
Yeah, I think the strength of this book was taking an absurdist look at not so absurd concepts that we find ourselves faced with in modern society. And in this book, they abandon the absurdity and just kind of were like, okay, we're going to be super heavy. And it doesn't work. I think if you're not going to be super absurd, you have to be super earnest. And this was neither. So that said, the first 2 issues are great, and I'm willing to keep reading it, but we just have to kind of see where issue 4 goes. All right. Can we all agree that Jim Zub is one of the greatest fantasy writers alive today?
Yeah.
Because now he's writing my favorite fantasy character. I don't really like fantasy outside of Red Sonja. And Jim Zub writing Red Sonja is the Red Sonja I need right now. I've had big complaints with Dynamite and the way they've handled Sonja and some of these other characters with maybe having too many series out in the Sonja Pantheon or in the Vampirella Pantheon, you know, and getting almost too disseverate from the original concept. And this feels like Jim Zub going, you know what? We're going to do the essential Red Sonja, you know, like those CDs they used to put out where it was just the hits. And I'm going to tell my Red Sonja story, and this is it. So I was very happy.
You know, the first thing I said when I saw this, and this was me prejudging it. Yay, another Red Sonja book. And not only that, but in the end of this one, and I won't spoil it, I was like, oh, that's awesome. But this definitely wasn't a bad book. I think I just haven't found a Red Sonja story that clicks with me. I thought I had that with the Samurai one, but, you know, that's not technically Red Sonja, I know. But, you know, I love sword and sorcery. I mean, hell, I loved the Red Sonja movie as a kid. I wore that thing out when I had it. Maybe it's just I want a comic version of the movie. I don't know. But again, not bad. Maybe once it gets going, I'll change my mind. I don't know what it is. I just haven't found that story yet that I get.
All right, this has got so many levels of fantasy going on. When you start reading it, you start hearing Aldo Nova in the background. Yeah, that joke was for Kyle. I'm going to liken this to the Invincible or Immortal. I don't remember if it was Invincible or Immortal. I think it was Immortal Red Sonja series written by Amanda Conner and Jimmy Palmiotti. That was the most Robert E. Howard Red Sonja I had read in a very long time. It felt like you were reading a classic Conan story. This is Jim Zub bringing his Dungeons and Dragons expertise into the Red Sonja universe. This feels like a D&D adventure beginning. It feels like, you know, oh, this is a rogue. This is, you know, it's got that feel to it. And there's a unique twist in it that I kind of am in for. So I actually really like, this is one of the better books for me this week. I do agree that they are putting out a lot of Red Sonja books and they're just throwing different words in front of it. But I really like this one. I think Jim Zub's writing will carry this if you want a classic fantasy or Dungeons and Dragons style story. I think the art was good.
Yeah.
I thought the cover was actually, I believe this is Lucio Perillo, who usually does very dramatic covers. This is still a good cover, but it's a little more light, and I actually like this quite a bit. So I'm looking forward to see where he's going with this. And the twist part got my attention. She can't remember her mentor, and then we get the twist ending, and it's like, oh, how's this gonna work? So this one's on my better of the week list.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I like the artwork in it, John.
Yeah, I would say the artwork is very traditional for a Red Sonja story.
Yeah, let me see if I can look up real quick here.
I have this idea that I would love to explore, and I don't know how it would work. But a roll your own ending comic, and Jim would have to write it, right? It's at any point the book says roll a d6 or a d20, and then based on your result, this is the page you go to. And I think Red Sonja would be the character to do that with, just because it has such D&D vibes.
Yeah, the art is Giovanni Valletta.
It's real strong.
Yeah.
Okay. Shock Shop #2 by Cullen Bunn. This is a follow-up to Shock Shop #1, which, if you remember, was a flip book. There were 2 stories, a front and a back. This is the same and continues both of those stories.
Yep.
So I'll take this one if you don't mind. Take this one first. Okay. So now that I see what they're doing, because my complaint about the first issue we read was, man, these stories are short. I thought it was going to be one of those where every book was going to be something different. Well, now I see, no, the second issue is the second part of both those stories from the first issue. So I was like, okay, so that means issue 3 is going to be issue 3 of both the stories. I think that's smart. I mean, I've never seen a book do that before. Like, usually when you read these things, they're just short little horror stories, and the next one is, a completely different thing. Now, it's different. It works for me. And I can full out say I was wrong about this book. I should have waited till the second issue to form my opinion, because now that I see what they're doing, I like this book a whole lot more now.
Yeah, Ed, it's so what you got in the first issue was essentially 2 11-page stories in a 22-page book. This is 2 more 11-page stories, but essentially consider those the issue 2s of both of those first stories.
To me, it seems like these are horror concepts that Cullen had that he wanted to do, but might not on their own be strong enough to lead a comic. So you split them and you turn it into Shock Shop. You put a narrator like Tales of the Crypt in front of it, or Elvira, and then they're just tales as characters telling. And then once you're done, if you have other stories, so it strengthens the premise of these by being with another story. So instead of it being, oh, this is a story about a guy who buys a haunted house and, his kids come to visit, and it becomes a story. It becomes a horror anthology that the individual premises aren't as important, because the idea is that when it runs to the end, you can swap to other stories. So I find that kind of interesting. I think one of the stories is stronger than the others so far. I'm curious to see how long they'll run and if Shock Shop will continue with new stories after. But it does seem like this is Cullen's little anthology book he's doing. And I have a feeling that the camping story may be closer to finished than the family story. In which case, maybe we'll get another one start while the other one continues, and then. But again, we'll have to see. They're decent stories. They're Tales of the Crypt. They're, basic horror stories. They're not anything that I think could lead their own title. But if you're looking for horror reads and you like Cullen Bunn, that's your book. He's got it right there for you. So.
It feels to me kind of like the comic book version of Scenes from an Italian Restaurant by Billy Joel, which is 3 individual song ideas that weren't full songs that he mashed together.
Are you trying to out vague music reference me tonight?
No.
Okay.
Scenes from an Italian Restaurant was a decent sized hit. So, but that's 3 different musical concepts mashed into one song because none of them are complete. The Beatles did the same thing. There's a number of instances where they've gone on to make successful songs that way.
Yeah.
And that's what this feels like. And I'm fine with it because Cullen Bunn writes a lot of stuff, and at some point you've got to do something to break it up. And every writer has ideas in their back pocket that they could never seem to break. And so maybe this is his way of saying, you know what? I'm not going to break them, but I got to get them off my plate. So here's the little tastes of what they are, and we'll just move on from there. All right. So the next book was one of my favorites of the week. However, I'm not 100% sure you could call it a comic book. It's currently digital first content, so it's only available from Comixology. And Dan has a visceral reaction to it. So I'm going to put the cover up and then let Dan react viscerally while I somehow try and find the dump button.
This is the most pretentious idea I've seen come out as a comic in a long time. Okay? If you are going to write a novelette or a short story and just have occasional background scribbles by Jock, it's not a comic. That's what they've put out. This is basically a handwritten, made to look like a handwritten journal in the form of a book. And there are so many concepts that actually having a picture of them would help explain the story, but there are none. It's just these little scribbles and map pages and stuff. So you never get an idea of what's really going on. It's confusing. It's like he's trying to channel Kurt Vonnegut but do it still in the comic medium because that's where he has access to. I am just over the top. It made me angry because I have so many comics that I have to read to prepare for the show. When we get them late, we get them, we read them, that I did not need this poor attempt at a novel. So that also wasn't even that interesting. It wasn't that good of an idea. Again, it feels like, somebody really trying to channel Kurt Vonnegut. So, and I did that without cursing. So, because that's what started the cursing was this book, and I said, "F the author."
So I gotta thank Dan for this because I didn't realize we were adding small novelettes because I just said small novel to the list. And at first I was like, maybe it's just too intellectual for me. But I was so lost at parts. There's so many discussions of 3 or 4 different types of beings in this book. And there's like, if something doesn't exist anymore that did back then, I'm going to color it in red. Or if I do this, I'm going to color it in this. And then they talk about going outside these lines that people could kill you or beat you if you're outside this line. Maybe if this was just a straight up book that got released, like the total thing was released as a book, I might feel different about it. But as a comic, it didn't feel like a comic, like at all. It felt like Reader's Digest. You read a couple pages, 6 or 7 pages in, you get a little scribbled, picture. Then you keep reading, and there might be another picture. So I don't know how this can be classified as a comic, but just wasn't for me.
Yep.
All right. So I see a lot of people in the comments, John and JD and Ed, talking about the negatives of this book. And there are negatives. Don't get me wrong. However, the concept is strong. It really is. The story itself is strong to me. It's an interesting version. To me, it's like Crossed if it wasn't just trying to be shocking, which is the problem Crossed had. It has the bones to be something real, to be something good. It is incredibly poorly executed. It's much like the starting offense of the Cleveland Browns. It has the pieces, but it ain't right. So don't just abandon all hope on this book yet. Because here's the thing that's yet to be determined. This is an issue 1 of a digital first concept. Before it hits print, we're going to see the rest of the concept. And while we may not read the rest of it on the show, I'll continue reading it and let you know. Because it's Ed, the Lions are carrying my fantasy team right now, so I'm not going to do that to myself. However, once we see the rest of the issues, it will really tell, is this just an anomaly in the series and a really bad way to start, or is this whole series a giant mistake? And then it'll hit print, and you'll have an opportunity to get it in your local comic shops, and you'll know.
The reason they called it Book of Evil is because it's what you're going to call it after reading it. It has nothing to do with the story.
Except that it does have to do with the story. But like, you had to get that far into the 60-page book that is a wall of text to understand that. The premise of it, Ed, is that in a very distant future, evolution changes the way people are made up, and it puts society in this very kind of dystopian class system between humans and animals, adults and kids, and what their roles are. And the idea of this book is it's a group of kids who are not quite to what you find out is kind of the break point between becoming an adult and still being a kid, and their goal to kind of break out of this society. So it's an interesting concept in that it's different, but again, it could just be incredibly poorly executed. Just
go read Kurt Vonnegut, save time.
Well, you should read Kurt Vonnegut anyhow, but like I said, it's one of those. I think the rest of the execution of the rest of the books is going to tell whether or not this series is any good.
I like the idea of execution.
See, like, I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm just saying I think it would make a better novel than trying to be a comic book.
Right. And it may. Like, that's what I'm saying, is it may be like, this should have been a novel. Yeah. Just like this should have been an email. Like, you know, you've all been on those in those meetings where this should have
Yes.
been an email. This should have been a novel. Or like somebody said, I'll wait for the Netflix adaptation. This should have been a movie.
Okay.
Right? Like that's a very real possibility with this book. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I'm going to keep trying it.
If it gets adapted by Netflix, it's just going to be a black screen with subtitles.
Dan should write it.
Which would be better than a lot of stuff Netflix puts out. Earth Divers,
Okay.
number 1.
I want this one
Mm-hmm.
because I think I actually like this one. I do and I don't. I love the concept. You know the old concept of, well, if you had a time machine, you could go back and kill Hitler. Well, think of it that way. But if the time machine went in the hands of Native Americans and they went back to kill Christopher Columbus, that's this book.
And the time machine is a cave.
Yeah, the time machine's a cave. And so from that point of view, the concept of it is really interesting. Some problems with it is we're spending way too much time with the idiots back in the future, trying to figure out if anything got changed, which is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Where we should just spend time with the guy who went to the past. I think that would be much more interesting. But
especially because the idiots in the future are just trying to decide, do we go back to the school and get a history book to figure out if anything has changed? It's like, really? Like, that's your point of contention?
Yeah, that's my same complaint with the current Quantum Leap is we're spending way too much time with the people where we should be spending all the time with Ben, the guy leaping. We need more time with the guy who is horrible, by the way. It's like, how bad can you be? So you don't have anybody you like in this story yet. But again, it's an interesting concept. And Native Americans can beat on people with this book. It's kind of interesting. So
I don't have too much to say on this one. I wasn't a fan, but I also don't believe that I'm the intended audience for this. Just right off the bat, Dan is definitely correct. There's nobody that I like in this book. The main guy just murks somebody as soon as he gets back to the past. And the other thing that I thought was kind of strange was I thought the cave protected the people inside from the changes that were going to be made to the past. I thought they said something about that.
yeah.
But then I'm like, but then they want to leave? So how would they even know what they were doing if they left the cave? They wouldn't realize if something changed. Time travel with books just I never get how they actually figure all this stuff out. But I don't know. I think if they make this guy, instead of him being like the hero, I think if they take another turn and make him kind of like a villain, he still kills Columbus, but he gets like power hungry or something back in the past. Maybe I can get into it, but I don't know. Like I said, it's just wasn't for me.
Yeah, I think this is one of those books that's going to spend more time exploring time paradox than actually changing time. So as long as the idiots in the future or in the current time are in the cave or around the cave, they can't perceive if anything has changed historically. And at the same time, we see that the main guy is not good at his job.
Well, he's not good at the job he's pretending to do.
Right. So what if you find out that what happened with Christopher Columbus coming here was one of those things that doesn't matter how you travel through time, you can't change. It's a set point in time. Like in Doctor Who, they talk about set points in time.
Yep.
There are things you can't change. So what if that's one of them and we're actually exploring a time paradox as opposed to an actual time travel book. And I think that has some potential. I think The Future Has Changed has some potential. This book is nothing but potential, so long as we get out of the stupid cave. Like, we have to spend less time with those people eventually. But, like, for real, you got to get out of the cave. Otherwise, this book makes no sense.
Book 3, they kill the guy that created The Apprentice.
Mark Burnett.
I thought that was Mark Burnett, but I didn't want to say his name without being sure.
I had to think about it for a second. It's Mark Burnett.
All right.
So, all right. So this is a book that Dan says we read, and I remember having read it. I didn't remember the salient points, but it felt very familiar. And I just kind of skimmed it today. This is Scott Snyder and Francisco Frankvilla's Night of the Ghoul. This was originally a Comixology original digital first concept that is now being printed and is in stores from Dark Horse. So we talked about Book of Evil, how it's a digital first concept. That's what this was, but now it's in stores. And I'm remembering now, Dan, one of the things that bodes well for Book of Evil is what boded well for We Have Monsters. There were problems when it was digital that were edited and fixed by the time it came out in print.
You mean they're going to put some art in it?
Maybe. I mean, is it entirely possible that Jock just didn't have his stuff done and they're not going to Gary Frank us? Like, I don't know.
They just took a picture of Scott Snyder's script and put it over some sketches and went, hey, put it out and we'll fix it in post.
Mm-hmm. He signed a big contract with them, Sean, with Dark Horse and Comixology to be the guy over there.
Mm-hmm. I remember, I reread this one. It's an interesting premise. It's based around The Night of the Ghoul is a classic horror movie that never got released. It's become mythic in its how good it's supposed to be. It supposedly got burned in a fire, but one particular guy finds part of a copy of it, and he spends a chunk of time trying to track down the original director who has disappeared, and figures out where he is, and that turns into this over-the-top horror story. But we're just starting to get into that part of it. So there's a lot of setup in this first issue. I don't remember us getting too far into it, reviewing it. So I remember liking the concept and the art. I'm a big fan of Francesco Francavilla. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where this goes. JD says that he read through the first 3 or 4. They didn't go. So I'm kind of curious about that. But yeah, that was the start of this one's at least interesting. I do recommend grabbing it off the shelf, taking a look at it. And if it kind of hits your buttons, then pick it up. If not, put it back and go find Sweet Candy Vigilante.
Yeah, and this just goes to show, how many different people have different opinions on things. Because I see a lot of folks in the chat, they weren't really big on this. I, on the other hand, I was. This would be my pick of the week. I read the whole thing. This was 60 pages, and I flew through it. It's creepy, and it has you don't really know what's going on, but in the good way of not knowing what's going on. The flashing between the movie story and the movie was really well done to me. I would suggest for people to go out and pick this up, especially if this cover or anything about this sounds interesting, pick it up. I thought it was an awesome book.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the middle on this one. I like the concept. I like this issue. I remember liking it the first time. I don't really remember it going anywhere, but it may just be that we dropped it.
Yeah.
Back in the days of just trying to read number ones. You know, it's interesting the concepts that they're able to explore in these Comixology originals, because these are books that might not otherwise find a home if it wasn't for digital proving that they work. And so that's interesting. I'm anxious to see where it goes from here. I'm not a huge, while I like horror movies, I'm not a fan of camp horror, in the sense of I don't like the kind of what they're going after here, this cult horror movie that never got made and finding out about it. That's not the stuff that generally interests me like it does some horror fans. So the deeper the psychological parts of this get, the more interested I'll be, the more it veers away from being so tied to this movie concept. So I'm very interested to see how it goes. It was a very good book. So.
I'm mad at.
Yay, that's everything. Remember, guys, Comic Shop Locator.
And I didn't curse once.
Aw.
It's true. Remember, guys, Comic Shop Locator, Comic Shop Locator, Comic Shop Locator.
.com.
Yep. All right. Well, we will be back.
Hey.
Thank you, John, for renewing or upping your tier or whatever this is. We got a John is a new member. Appreciate that. Yeah, guys, and it's like we said earlier when we were talking about Siren's Gate. It has the potential. It just wasn't kind of what we were looking for or what we thought it would be.
Yeah.
And I'll say it for the third or fourth time. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's just I don't get what they're going for and that other people get it.
Yep.
So
yeah, these are just opinions. You guys have your own. What my favorite book's not going to be the same as Kyle's, is not going to be the same as Jay's, and not the same as your guys's. So, yeah.
Get what you like. Get what you like.
Yes, absolutely. All right. We will see everyone next week for more comic books and opinions on In Stores This Week. Dan will be back tomorrow and Thursday. Dan, what are we talking about?
Tomorrow will be the Rings of Power episode 5?
No idea.
5, 6, whatever the most recent one is. The big battle. And that was spectacular. If you're not following this series, it is so huge. So huge battle in this last episode.
And then what's Thursday?
Thursday we'll be talking about Andor.
Nice. And then Jay will be back on Friday with Henri and Nick and Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will be back next Monday with everybody. So we will see everybody then. Or no, next Tuesday. I will see everybody then, and we will talk at you later. Have a good one.